back to the African Youth Economic Forum. Thank you for being part of it. If you've just joined and you're not understanding what's going on, today is the launch of a continental-wide platform in partnership with the African Peer Review Mechanism, an organ of the African Union, YouthBridge Trust, based here in South Africa, and Reset Global People, based in Ghana. The aim of the African Youth Economic Forum is to create a platform for young people to engage with economic issues to help drive the economy, the development of the African economy further. We've had great speakers, so if you've missed out, don't worry, we've got another session coming up today. And we also have day 2, I must let you know, tomorrow, but also at the end of our session, we're moving to the African Peer Review Mechanism Day. It's their celebration of the 18th birthday. So please stay on the line. It's going to be another incredible program planned and prepared as we celebrate the role of the African peer review mechanism in driving governance on the continent. So I just want to introduce the next session by introducing just some of the speakers that you're going to hear. Patrick K. Stephenson is the head of research at Imani, Ghana, and he'll be moderating this session. This session is hosted by Breaking Down Borders Africa, and the session focuses on Pan-Africanism and African integration, African Free Trade Agreement, and Free Movement of People Protocol. It's going to be an exciting session. We have Mandisa Mbele, the Director Deputy of Corporate Governance and Traditional Affairs for the Republic of South Africa, Nicolatte Mutuku. If I pronounce your name, I apologize. I'm from Nairobi, Kenya, and we have so many different countries represented here, so many different dialects. So I apologize in advance. So we have, like I mentioned, Nicolatte Mutuku, the founder of Walking the African Journey, Bame Modungwa, the project officer, Supply Development Program for UNDP Botswana, and the co-founder of Minds for Tomorrow Association Botswana. And again, Professor Ezrah Aharone, the founder director, Center for Global Africa, and he's also professor of political science and global societies at Delaware State University in the United States. Thank you again for joining us all the way from the USA. The time difference must be a challenge. It's very early in the morning, so we really appreciate you connecting, Professor. And to all the panelists that are involved, thank you again. Over to you, Patrick, as you moderate this session.
Well, thank you very much, Seth. That's a very succinct introduction. And as you indicated, this really is one of the conversations that follows from what we have already seen as far as this forum for this year is concerned. Our task really is to try to tease the mind of all the audience that are on this conversation today around very essential issues concerning Pan-Africanism, the integration of the African continent, the continental free trade area, which has become a mainstay of industrial conversations around the continent. And at the center of all of that is the conversation around the free movement of people and goods, a lot of which has already been touched on. And I suspect the responsibility of this panel is to unpack that and answer some of the important and essential questions that have been bothering on the minds of young Africans. As you know, the continent as it is today is equally plagued with the challenges regarding COVID-19, and the energies of young people have been mobilized, particularly along the front lines in the provision of healthcare solutions that are dealing with COVID. Outside of that, you've had young people that are involved in different shapes and forms of solutions that are driving the agenda on the African continent. So it's important that if we talk about these phenomena, whether we're integrating the continent or there's a rebirth of ideals by which the African must live today, the integration of the continent, the young people and particularly women are featured in that conversation. And I've been joined by some of the most brilliant young and innovative minds of the continent that I think will share perspectives from policy, from entrepreneurship, and from people that are actually involved in doing things on the African continent. We can set that conversation right. Over the next 30 minutes, I will run through some questions and answers with some members of the panel, and I'll start off with a quick round of introduction. So we should start off with Professor Ezrah Aharone. I mean, if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we can carry on with the conversation from there. Prof.
Thank you so much. And once again, it's a great pleasure to be here representing the 6th region from the state of Delaware, where I teach at the Delaware State University, where I'm also the director of the Center for Global Africa, and in a very Pan-African kind of way, the Center for Global Africa involves the harnessing of our over 100 historically Black colleges and universities to tap into the intellectual capital, the specialties of the universities, the expertise of the professors to facilitate development in Africa in measurable ways and in ways that really, if you look at the history of our HBCUs, it is not translated into the types of intellectual, measurable capital types of initiatives as the Center for Global Africa is designed to do. So as old as our institutions are, it's a very new thing. And I'm sure if I asked you, I don't know if you've ever heard the term HBCU before. Have you, Patrick? But if you were to go around, you'll find that it's not common that people would know. So our mission is to popularize HBCUs in Africa, just like on the reverse, it's to popularize Agenda 2063 in the US and translate that into the Africa that we want. So it's about cross-fertilizing the two, the diaspora and Africa, in meaningful ways.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Prof, for that introduction. We'll go over to Nicolatte and Mutuku. And as Seth indicated, if I end up butchering anybody's name, I apologize. That is why I'm doing this quick round of introductions so I can get the pronunciations of the names right.
You pronounced it very, very, very well. Well done. Hi, my name is Nicolatte Mutuku, and I'm based in South Africa. I'm co-founder of Walking the African Journey, which is a Pan-African organization where we stimulate the young minds of African youth within the Southern African region to start opening up their minds to different ways of doing business and entrepreneurship, not only within their region, but also looking for partnerships across East, West, and North Africa. I also sit on the board of the Global Chamber of Business, headquartered in Washington, DC, and we are responsible for connecting young people globally on how they can do business together and how they can start finding other business opportunities within countries that they are not currently residing. And I'm so excited to be part of this panel today, as I have been advocating for the African Continental Free Trade Area for the past 1 year. So I'm excited to be part of this panel today.
Fantastic introduction there, and we look forward to the submissions as far as the program continues. The next person I will bring up will be Mandisa Mbele. I hope I got that right too. Mandisa?
Yes, good day, good day. Yes, you did get it right. Thank you very, very much. My name is Mandisa Mbele. I'm also from South Africa. I work in government in South Africa, but today I'm here not only as a government official, but as a young person, as a young person who wants to see how we can exploit this free trade area, how young people can participate and be at the forefront of this agreement. And I would like to express my views as a young person, and also how young people in Lubumbashi, a young person in Goma, and a young person in Ethiopia can, in my position, can exploit and do their best to reap all the rewards that have to offer under this agreement.
Thank you very much for making that quick, Mandisa. And I think that, you know, the capacity in which you joined this panel and this conversation is even more important, because there are issues that will border on policy and what policymakers can do to create an enabling environment for young people. And you're equally a young person. And I think at the center of the conversation is what we can actually use the energies of young people, you know, leadership and politics, to sort of shape what the political narrative will be. And so I'm really excited to have you on this conversation as well. The last person we shall bring up, well, last in no particular order, is Bame Modungwa. I hope I got that right too.
Somewhat. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bame Modungwa. I am from Botswana, where I am currently based and working for the United Nations Development Program. Prior to this, I was working for the African Union based out of Addis, based out of Ethiopia. Working with the Department of Trade and Industry, supporting small and medium enterprises across the continent, and in particular, building programs to support them to benefit from the African Free Trade Continental Area. So I am a huge proponent of the agreement, but also have a soft spot for youth empowerment and youth engagement. I am a co-founder of an association called Minds for Tomorrow, which works to cultivate change makers within Botswana's youth citizenry. So that's how I'm here today, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Bame, thank you very much for correcting the name, but also providing a bit of a context of how you engage with this. And I like the fact that, you know, besides, you know, working in development, you've equally, you know, have your hands rolled up, you know, as far as the African continent is concerned. And I think that that is very refreshing to hear. But to kickstart the conversation, so there's a lot of things we have been asked to address, and I suspect we may not be able to exhaust all of it, but we'll try our best to share a lot of ideas that may generate the right conversations that, you know, young people on the African continent need to. And I'll start off with you, Professor Aharone, right? Because as we speak today, like I indicated before, you're looking at a continent that time and time again, when we are in crisis, okay, young people get mobilized, they put together their energies and get to the forefront and jump and make things happen, try to provide solutions that drive the continent forward. Over that period, there have been different things that move here and there that, you know, undergird the structural difficulties and challenges that concern how we can bring young people into the conversation. You are based outside of the continent, but doing things that bridges the gap between what's happening in diaspora and what's happening on the African continent. From your view, what do you think we can do to address some of these structural bottlenecks and difficulties that then mainstreams or brings together the framework that, you know, gets young people involved in activities of the African continent going forward?
Well, I think that because of technology, the world is a different place. And through the means of being able to communicate, young people now have at their fingertips and disposal, whereby anybody could be a journalist, anybody could be a photographer, you know, anybody could be a historian, anybody can transfer information, you know, in split seconds. And so this provides platforms by which ideas can be facilitated in much greater fashion, in much quicker fashions. When you look at, and I just give a quick example, like a Marcus Garvey here in the States, who had no internet, no telephone, no email, and yet was able to mobilize millions of people, you know, with ideas, you know. And so the power of an idea and sharing that idea and having it grounded, you know, in institutional strengths, you know, that's very important. And as I'm listening, everyone here represents some great institution. And if I could give a quote, there's a book written by a psychologist named Bobby Wright in the 1970s. It's called Psychopathic Racial Personality. And he talks about institutions. And he says that real revolutions occur when institutions are in conflict, not individuals. And so it's the individual who has the intellectual capacity to drive institutions, you know, to bring about change. So the idea of combining these modern forms of communications with institutional strength, that is a key component to gaining the visibility, attracting resources, and making great things happen.
Well, thank you very much, Prof. And I think I'll take off of, you know, the final point you made there, which is, you know, the contribution of what emerging technologies really creating, the space emerging technologies are creating for young people to actively participate. We've had a narrative where for a very long time, women, particularly young women, for example, because of intersectional reasons, have been very marginalized in participating in development on the African continent and taking up leadership roles. I'm excited that on the panel today, we have very young, dynamic women, and you are the only man, and possibly not also in our generation, right? And so when we speak specifically to that group and the energy that sits there, you know, beyond technology, what else do you think we can do to bring them into the fray of the conversation? I know you've talked technology, you've talked institution, but here I'm looking specifically at that group and the energies that sits there.
Mm-hmm. And I think I mentioned a common idea. You know, what are we galvanizing around? If we know and have common definitions and we establish common practices, that's a key, because a lot of times you'd be surprised, people have different versions of the same thing. And when you can bring people together around the power of an idea, you know, it has great gravity, great weight to be able to bring people together. And as I said, attract resources that are necessary. So ideas are currencies. You know, this platform that we're using now, whether it's Zoom or Facebook, these are all very new technologies, you know, that have taken traction and everybody uses them, you know. And so what innovations do we have? What innovations can we create that are going to be play the same role that, you know, will be exported out of Africa that others use? So the power of the idea, you know, ideas are currencies.
Well, that pretty much sums up, you know, the points you make there. And I think that I will pick up the next set of questions with Nicolatte Mutuku, who I suspect, based on your background, and again, we talked about institutions with Professor Aharone, right? What sort of institutional, you know, architecture, as far as the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, okay, from its design to implementation, what sort of institutional architecture do we think, or do you think, can be deployed such that we can exact the energies of the young people and also women in particular, you know, in bringing the realization of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area to life, and also ensuring that that particular group is not left behind, as we have seen in the last 50, 60 years of the development of Africa?
Thank you so much. So I think with regards to that, it goes both ways. The institutions as well as the young people and the women as well. From an institutional perspective, I think they should try and do more in putting out information for young people and women to actually have this information. And usually when they put up information, what I've noticed is it's high economic, financial, and technical lingo that does not that the young people do not understand. It's a high legal lingo and language and processes that we do not understand just by reading them. So I think they should demystify the whole notion of putting out information in legal or economic terms that people don't understand, but also just come down to their level and actually explain it in ways that young people and women can understand. And by that, I also mean not only people within the urban areas, because we see the gap growing bigger and bigger with people that are in the township as well as rural areas, where people that are living in the urban areas catch up to these things quicker than people that are living in the rural areas. And that keeps stretching the gap between economic development of the urban area the rural areas. And from the youth and the women, I think we need to equip ourselves with knowledge through research. Once we hear about what this is all about, I think it takes us to actually take a proactive role and start looking for information and opportunities. If there are no opportunities, I think we need to start creating opportunities in our own, so that you get that seat in the room or the boardroom where decisions are being made. Make sure that your voice is heard. And also, I think once we see the potential of the African continental free trade area, we should also start looking at industries that will actually make a difference. So I don't think duplicating the same things that happen in Zimbabwe or Zambia will actually make us grow as young people. But let's start looking at production. Let's start looking at, recycling, areas where we would not normally dive into. Let's research, let's find out how we can do that, and also start connecting with other groups of young people within the African continent to make it more impactful for us and get information. So I think for me, that is it. Is idea stimulation, access and exposure is what would actually make this successful.
But Mandisa, there's a young person on the African continent listening to you today. They've seen these and heard these practical things that you have sort of outlined. Make sure information that is communicated to young people is in a lingua franca that they can understand. Beyond that, getting the right institutional setup that equally helps them. They're asking themselves, but how do I do this? Okay, so the what we have answered partially, but can you touch a little bit on the how? Hello, Mandisa. Well, I'm not sure Mandisa, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, I can hear you. Sorry, I'm so sorry about that. I just had a power cut.
That's fine. So I was saying that, we've seen some context that have already been set. I just wanted to pick your thoughts on, the how some of this institutional architecture could be provided. So something like information access, for instance, that was talked about earlier, is in a format that young people on the African continent can appreciate.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
So I was asking, Nicolatte, just touched on what in her view she thought will be the practical steps or the practical tools that young people and women in particular can follow through in terms of exacting the best value that we can ever get from the continental free trade area and the potentials that it holds for the continent. I was asking from your perspective, if there are some other practical tools or how we can actualize some of the things that Mandisa talked about, and if you can tie that in with some other aspirations that we have on the continent, such that marginalized groups or young individuals who have not had the opportunity of exacting value from the African continent can do that for themselves. If you can tie that in for us, I'll be very excited.
Thank you. I think, let me use South Africa an example. A vast majority of South Africans, especially women, are in the rural areas and have absolutely no idea about this free trade area and how they can tap into it. Some of them are in semi-urban areas. They also have absolutely no idea. And some young people are also absolutely clueless about this. So it is the responsibility of the institutions, as Nicolatte was saying, in the individual countries to not allow these people to fall behind, to bring them along with them. So they have to go out to the people and have programs for people in the rural areas, for women and young people in the rural areas that are being left behind and who have absolutely no idea that their skills, their products, or their services can be used in the continent and in this agreement. So it's institutions, but also people who are in the institutions must communicate in a manner or in a way that doesn't leave the people that they're trying to communicate to confused and that they don't understand, or they must also communicate the benefits. Why should they be part of this? Why should they not just trade with themselves in their specific small little in their villages? Communicate the benefits, and also communicate lessen the challenges, because there are challenges. So lessen the challenges so that it doesn't become an uphill battle, another battle for a woman or a young person to participate in this agreement.
I get that. And so I think you're both emphasizing the relevance of communication and reducing the technicalities, so to speak, in the agreement itself, to everyday things that young people on the African continent, particularly marginalized groups, can do. We've seen this happen time and time again for different frameworks for the development of Africa that we haven't been able to actualize properly. So I think it's a very important point. And Mandisa, my second question to you before I move on to somebody else will be: we've been talking about Agenda 2063 for some time now. We have been talking about some aspirations that Africans want to pursue, and I suspect the continental free trade area is one of those aspirations that we had, the ability to trade between and amongst ourselves. And that is also born out of the Sustainable Development Goals, for example, which is a global agenda that Africa is equally pursuing. How do we ensure that the youth and marginalized communities participate in realizing these objectives?
The first thing is, this agreement has to have an implementation plan. And the devil is always in the detail. So, when you want to fly to Ethiopia from South Africa and you want to go on holiday, you need to have a complete itinerary and logistics, how you're going to get there. And I think one of the problems here is that there isn't actually a plan, a day-to-day plan on how we are going to do all of this, how we're going to bring everybody on board. Yes, we have a lovely end game and where we want to be, and it's very beautiful, but how do you take a woman in Ixopo, young people in Ixopo or Bulwa in KZN, and put them in this train and sell this idea to them and take them and take them with you to this great place of free trading and free and access to all these great markets? So that, I think, and all the individual countries and individual institutions must have their own implementation plan. So in South Africa, our government must have their own very, very detailed implementation plan, and each institution in the country must have a detailed implementation plan. And those implementation plans must speak to everyone, especially, like I'm saying, the young person or the woman in Bulwa or in Ixopo in South Africa or wherever in the continent, and other countries must do the same.
Well, thank you very much, Mandisa. I think that sort of equally puts, the pointers we've been talking about around all these issues in context. And I'll go to you, Bame, right away, because again, they've talked about the end game. Mandisa just finished on the end game. Yes, we all usually have an idea what the end should be. So if you take the AFTA, for example, we know what we're expecting out of it. If you take, the Sustainable Development Goals, if you take Agenda 2063, we know what we want at the end of the day. What is usually missing, which I suspect, the issue of communication and the sort of information that is provided all seem to touch on, is getting the people of Africa to own and consider themselves a part of, what the end game should be. But if they have to own it, we have to understand what sorts of mechanisms and what sort of activities can be undertaken to get them to own the ideals and then pursue them. Any thoughts you want to share on this?
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. I think we've missed something, Patrick. I think we've discussed a lot about the end game, like you're saying, and almost the how. But I just want to take us a little bit back. When we're talking about the African Continental Free Trade Area, we need to remember that this is a huge undertaking by the African Union, the Secretariat, etc., that is really trying to unite 55 member states of the African Union and encourage increased intra-African trade within African continent. And it's not an easy task to do, but we have seen that it has been the fastest agreement that has entered into signatory. And so far, about 36 countries have ratified this agreement. So already we see that the political will is there. African countries, have shown their interest in this agreement and really are saying, we are signing up to ensure that this will be a successful agreement. And the reason why we're here today is because, like we've mentioned quite often already, there are marginalized groups in the form of women and young people that often get left behind when such instruments are being put into place. And it's not the nature of an agreement to naturally do that, but rather, I think it's the structure that we find ourselves in within the global community. When you're talking about the marginalization of women, we know that in a lot of African countries, we live in a very patriarchal society. So even when agreements like these are being laid out and implemented, inadvertently, they're going to leave out women in some way. We know that women make up the majority of cross-border traders currently, particularly in the informal sector. So really, the AFCFTA and the Secretariat that's implementing it needs to look into how to support those women to be able to reap the benefits of the agreement. I think Nicolatte mentioned this earlier. This is not something that's going to happen automatically, or people aren't just, the information isn't miraculously going to appear to them. So what has been happening, and I hope will continue to happen, is various stakeholders to the agreement, such as the UN Regional Bureau in Africa, UN Women, have been developing a lot of programs and trainings around supporting these informal cross-border traders to be able to realize those benefits. I think the other fear is that this is an agreement that's going to be biased towards large producers in the continent. Once we open up the borders and we liberalize trade, there's a fear that the small and medium enterprise, whether it be youth or women, will get left behind. So another area that needs to then be strengthened is to say, okay, what are the tools that SMEs need to be able to get to that export level? Because we're no longer talking about trade, about producing just for our locality or the national level. We're talking about producing goods that will be sent from South Africa to Kenya. So I just wanted to give that context, but to the point of your question, which is around, how do we ensure that young people and women really feel like they have ownership over such an agreement? I think the ladies have touched on this already around, access to information. But another one is to emphasize to governments themselves, who will, at the end of the day, be the implementers of the AFCFTA at national level, to really ensure that in the process of developing their national implementation strategies, they ensure full stakeholder participation in that process. So what that means is simply to say, as they're developing this plan, they are young people that are policymakers out there. They are young people that have studied, public policy and administration. They are young people, yes, that might not have the qualification in academia, but are entrepreneurs and are building innovations. They need to ensure that they engage those stakeholders in that process.
The general session. Sorry, guys, I am going to be that gentleman that doesn't knock to open the door, just barges in. It's a fascinating conversation, but can we wrap it up? I'm giving you 5 to 6 minutes max, just to wrap up your thoughts. Really great insights, but if you could just wrap up your statements in the next 6 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Seth. We will try to do that. Mandisa, please finish up.
Bame?
Bame, sorry, please finish up.
Yes, I was just making the point that, the AFCFTA is at continental level, but it is national governments that are going to be implementing it. And we have to ensure that at national level, it is an inclusive and participatory process that ensures that the voice of women and young people is heard and is included, and that there's a concerted effort to give them that voice.
Well, so in the course of rounding up, I think that there's a question that I think one of the members in the audience has put across. That so far we've had this conversation, we haven't really touched on the free movement protocol itself, right? And I don't know if Professor Aharone, you want to touch on that. What exactly does that mean in terms of actualizing this and going forward? in like 2 minutes, if you can do that.
I was gonna say, in fact, that's one of the items I was looking forward to hearing more about, to understand the African perspective of that movement protocol.
Great. Well, in that case, then I will pick the thoughts of Bame on this, and then we can continue the conversation from there.
Yeah, I think the panel before us was touched on this quite significantly to note that the progress on the free movement of people, of persons protocol has been a lot slower than that of the AFCFTA. I don't want to commit myself, but the numbers that I heard going around is that only 4 African countries have ratified this agreement. And out of 55, it tells you that there's a long journey to go on that. And I think we've all heard the arguments about the difficulties of doing this. You are asking 55 different sovereign states to open up their borders. And we know that there are concerns about which direction the majority of people will move into, and the economic impact of that. But what I think, and I'll bring it back to the AFCFTA, what the AFCFTA will do well is it's a first step in encouraging liberalization on the African continent. We are using trade as a tool to do this, but in doing so, in starting slow and asking countries, let's liberalize on the economic factors. This opens up, the mindsets of Africans towards moving into a direction where we can have that free movement of persons on the continent. Through trade, we'll see the free movement of capital, of labor. As goods and services are going forward, there are people that also need to facilitate that process. So I think we'll start to see the integration of the continent as on an economic level, but I believe that will encourage us to move towards deepened integration and towards agreement, moving forward on the agreement for movement of people.
Nicolatte, if you can hear me, you have the final word on this conversation. What would be your advice to any African young person that is listening to us in this conversation today?
Thank you for that. So my final advice to young people and women around our continent is to start participating in decision-making processes. Like I said, research and be part of that decision-making. Start making economic allies, I would say, in other countries. Join all those groups that we have seen that have been formed virtually of young, different entrepreneurs across Africa, and start learning from them. Start learning how you can get into their markets. What is the demand in their country that you might be producing in your country, and what opportunities are there to start leveraging? And I think also, just for ideas stimulation, I think young people should also, just start traveling, even as we are in the process of implementing the AFC FTA. I think it's important for young people to actually just start traveling within Africa so they can get a feel of what is out there for them and experience it for themselves, and come back and recruit more people. So I think participation is the keyword that I would want to leave young people and women with today.
Thank you very much. Every good thing we understand at some point must come to an end. And so this conversation, as exciting as it is, definitely has to be drawn to a close. But I'm sure the conversation doesn't end there. It continues elsewhere across Africa. We've just given you teasers or pointers of issues that you should be thinking about. Thank you very much, Mandisa and Mbele, to Nicolatte, Mutuku, to Bame, Modungwa. I almost did what I did before, and to Professor Ezrah Aharone for pointing us in the right direction and the things we should be thinking about as far as the development of the African continent is concerned. Pan-Africanism, African integration, what we can do in the area of trade and the free movement of people and goods. Indeed, these are not new things. If you look at some of the most illustrious, empires that have been built across Africa in our own economic history, you find that at the heart of the success of these empires was the ability of Africans to move around, trade, and engage with ourselves. And I think we lost our way as a result of colonialism. So finding ourselves back is a very important thing. We want to thank Breaking Down Borders, the Africa Peer Review Mechanism, the Africa Union for organizing and putting young people together to have these conversations, because we are the future that we have been waiting for. Thank you for listening to this conversation, and I look forward to seeing all of you online and offline when sky waves are finally open. Thank you very much for joining this conversation.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Fascinating session. And the feedback that we're getting is, 1, the future is young. 2, the future is women. So thank you to the panelists that were there. This was a wonderful session. Professor, you were in the midst of great leaders, great female leaders that are taking the charge when it comes to the continent. So thank you so much, Patrick. Thank you, Mandisa, Nicolatte, Bame, and Professor Ezrah. I would just like to just give a special recognition to the organizer of this session, which is Breaking Down Borders Africa. And I'm going to ask Ms. Tabi Singh, the founder of Breaking Down Borders Africa, very quickly just to share about what the organization does in closing off of this session, and just to hear what they do, their purpose around Breaking Down Borders Africa. We felt it was really important that they chaired this session, and can we just give them a round of applause virtually for just hosting a great session. So Tabi Singh, could you just give us a very quick note about what Breaking Down Borders Africa does and why you started this great organization? Over to you, Tabi Singh.
Hi, Seth. A little bit about Breaking Down Borders Africa. We are an African youth-led and focused organization that aims to provide a novel framework and platform for deliberation on African socio-economic and development opportunities and challenges. We run 2 flagship programs. We have an exchange program where we collaborate with other youth-led organizations across the continent on different programs and skill transfer programs across the different countries. We also run a youth summit where we gather youth from across the continent to gather and co-learn and find ways to create the Africa that we want on an inclusive space. We've been running our summit for the past 5 years. We have a network of youth from across 60 countries in Africa and the diaspora. And we were very excited to be invited to this platform. And we hope that the session that went by, and I actually don't hope, we all experienced it, was very insightful. And just thank you for inviting us, and thank you to our speakers.
Thank you so much, Tabi Singh, for letting us know about what Breaking Down Borders does. As you can see, we're keeping COVID protocols, ensuring that everyone has masks on, as we're standing a little bit at a distance from each other. So just to wrap up, we have come to the end of day 1 of the African Youth Economic Forum. Fantastic sessions, and I must warn you that tomorrow is going to be extraordinary. But following this session now, we're going to go into the celebrations of the Africa Peer Review Mechanism Day. Lennon, can you tell us more about what's happening there?
So the African Peer Review Mechanism celebration, it's really a day of celebrating Africa's governance. I know a lot of people are always saying Africa is poorly governed, but 18 years ago, some of the founding fathers of the African Union, President Thabo Mbeki, President Wade, President Obasanjo, they came up with a very, very, very unique institution, which is called the African Peer Review Mechanism. The APRM basically does self-assessment for governance. Basically, a country is looking itself in the mirror, saying what is wrong with its governance, then experts from the APRM come in, they actually do the assessment of governance. But one of the positive things that has happened with the APRM is that now it gives room for citizens to participate,
Excellent.
to say what's wrong with their governance. So
Excellent.
at the APRM, we're trying so hard to get young people to actually participate in country reviews. A few country reviews are coming up. South Africa's 2nd generation review, Nigeria's 2nd. These are big countries in the APRM.
Excellent.
So today's celebrations, they are actually bringing in the diaspora. We've got an artist from Sudan, Mr. Manassa. We've got artists from South Africa, and I think her name is Swangile, you might know her.
Yes.
But the biggest artists that you might know are actually Mr. Robert Koo.
Excellent.
Celebration, come on.
All right,
you know that song,
I
yeah?
definitely know that
and
song.
we've got a spoken word from Mr. Soul Expression. So guys, please do not leave the chat. With the same link, please encourage your friends to come in. The celebration's about to start in the next 30 minutes.
And just to touch on what Lennon had mentioned, African Youth Economic Forum was the proud partner, almost the pre-event to the APRM Day. So we're continuing on with the African Youth Economic Forum. We're just joining in the celebrations of the APRM Day. So I want to encourage you to participate, share, network. I see a lot of you are dropping your email addresses and contact details. Keep doing that in the chat. This is a space for you to network with other like-minded individuals on the continent that are wanting to contribute towards change. So stay on the line. The session does begin at 3 o'clock. And we'll have 40 member states from the African Union. So it's a huge celebration, and we just want to encourage you to participate. And also now, day 2 for the African Youth Economic Forum. We're not ending, the train hasn't stopped. We're continuing tomorrow on the very same link from 12 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. as well. We've got great sessions planned for you, and if I can find those sessions for you, but I know one's around the future of work. There's one around
healthcare, gender. You know, we've got a panel with good experts that are talking on SDGs, gender. So I think you're going to miss an opportunity to actually learn and network, particularly ladies of Africa. Please do join.
Who are the future of the continent as well.
No, it's not the future, it's the now, sir.
I love that. I love that.
It's the now of Africa. So thank you so much for joining us. We highly appreciate your support.
Keep tweeting AYEF Forum, AY Forum. The hashtag is also APRM Day. And stay on the link, this specific link. You can also watch on Facebook. We're streaming live. And also thank you to our media partners, Tycoon Tribe, as well as Agenda 2063 TV. So you've got about 30 minutes to go get some lunch, answer those emails, and then come back for the continuation of the APRM Day and the African Youth Economic Forum. Thank you. Take care and God bless.